time servers. So I probably should turn it over to Dan so he can talk more about the cartography part of it.
Well, I wanted to ask one quick question. With that,
sure.
With what you're doing with that experiments, how does the factors of weather, water, like close by rivers, or say a limestone or quartz foundations, or a lot in the ground, or high power electrical wires, how does these outside elements affect, or do they affect, or what's the result of that?
Another really good question. As far as we know, and from the studies that have been done with random number generators so far, it doesn't seem like any of those things you just mentioned can affect the output of a random number generator. Now, that's an interesting thing, because the random number generator really, it's an interesting tool for use in hauntings, because unlike any other tool you might use, like an EMF meter or anything else, a camera or a recorder that has a camera lens or a microphone, an RNG has no outward-facing sensors at all. All it does is just sits there cranking out a continual stream of zeros and ones, and then you mathematically test it to see if that data stream is still random or if it's gone off the rails. And so we look at it, and it's kind of like I sometimes refer to it as an electronic coin flipper. We do 100 coin flips, and then we look at those 100 flips to see if there are, significantly more heads than tails than chance alone could account for. And if we find that to be true, then the RNG flashes the little screen. It writes all of the data to the screen, how many zeros, how many ones. It makes an internal log of all of these events, so that it also makes an RNG almost impossible to hoax. And so there's just a lot of positive elements about that. And they don't, since they have no outward-facing sensors, they are not affected by any of these things that you mentioned, like the water, or the limestone, or the EMF spikes in the area, or whatever. And yet they do correspond to the paranormal experiences that our researchers are having as they navigate the haunted house.
Okay, and one other quick question. Have you ever come across a juvenile in puberty with that's creating poltergeist activity? So with that involved, and maybe there's psychokinesis stuff, does any of that affect it, or have you had a chance to test it with that yet, or what's up with that?
We haven't really. So go ahead. We haven't. Say.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, we really haven't had a chance to do anything like test it with that yet. Although that would be very interesting indeed, and I'm really aware of the fear that you're talking about, which was strongly suggested by one of our most preeminent parapsychologists, the late William Roll, who talked a lot about the connection of young adults who just hit puberty, and they seem to sometimes be what we call a focal agent or a focal person in what's called RSPK, which is the parapsychologist's term for poltergeist activity. But no, we have not had a chance to run into that so far.
And one other question: have you ever run into what I call real evil incarnate, the inhuman stuff? And if you have, how has that changed the results, or was it pretty much the same per diem?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that question one more time?
Yes. Have you ever come across Inhuman Spirits that to do your testing? And if so, is the results different? Are they pretty much the same, or have you not come across that yet?
Oh, well, can I jump into that a little bit there, Mike?
Yeah,
absolutely, Dan.
Okay, so basically, that's another way that the PRI kind of differs from what you would consider your normal ghost groups or your normal investigators. We really don't classify any of the entities that we come across. I mean, the mere classification would be intelligent or unintelligent. Just because we try very, very hard to not apply any sort of folklore or anything to what we're trying to investigate. So we're more investigating the phenomena itself than trying to apply any sort of a classification to it at this point.
Okay, I got another quick question. With that said, now if somebody's going in and the difference between a residual and, since you don't classify, and a legit haunting, are the results going to be the same? You know what I'm saying? Because the reactions from the investigator could be the same.
Well, and that could actually come across, and we don't know, honestly. I mean, this is very, very much in its infancy, but it very much could be. We do have a lot of instances where the investigators do perceive activity that we don't get an RNG hit, and so those are logged as well. But during our data analysis, it's primarily the RNG coordination with the investigators effect that we're concerned with.
Okay.
We really don't know what causes. We really don't know what causes the RNG to respond. If respond is even the correct word to use, we just know there is a correlation between what our investigators are experiencing as they go through a haunted house, no matter what that is, whether they think it's a ghost, demon, incarnate, elf, whatever. It doesn't really. It could be anything. We don't know what it is, but all we can assert at this point is that there is a correlation between their experiences and the RNG going off. Having a hit, but that alone is significant because, in my mind, that adds evidential weight to the experiences that the paranormal investigators are having, because suddenly their experience is not in isolation, because here's another piece of equipment at the same locality that agrees with them.
Right.
It's having its own experience at the same moment that they're having their experience. So that bolsters what they're cataloging and reporting.
Now, let me ask you this. What's your long-term goal with this information, and how, are you going to try to get it where you can get a piece of equipment that you can hand hold it and you can corroborate with what's going on, or what's your long-term goal with this?
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Dan. Well, as far as the RNG goes, just as far as the RNG alone, we're hoping that this correlation becomes solid enough that we can look at it as almost a predictive element, that we can say, hey, the RNG just gave us an anomalous hit, so everybody out in the field, this is something suddenly shifted in the probability. I sometimes think of it as a probability field within the haunted house. So, our idea is to say if the RNG has given us a hit, then everybody be especially aware and attentive, because that's the time when something paranormal is most likely to occur.
I got you. So you can get it down.
That's what I'm hoping.
Okay, you can get it down to a time frame. Yeah. And, wonder if you could ever get it down to an area of a house, and a time frame. Wouldn't that be something?
That would be, and actually we're starting to look at doing that through multiple RNGs running. That's going to be one of the experiments that's coming out. But just to add to a long-term goal, one of my pie in the sky goals eventually, there's a couple actually. One is we would actually be able to take this methodology into a location and say, yes, it is active, no, it's not active. So, for the first time in history, we would actually be able to document whether a house was, quote, haunted or not. So that's a big one. And the second one would be, I have hopes that as we gather enough data, and eventually, we can hopefully get other teams using the same methodology and submitting data, that we can start patterning hauntings, and we can start patterning activity, and we can actually become predictive of when activity is most likely to happen. And if we can do that, then we can actually say, okay, now we can study what's going on, because we're going to have activity at 2:15 a.m. or whatever. So then, if you have experiments that you want to run in the field, you can start doing that with a better chance of success.
Or you could at least say we have a greater probability by averages from our data that between this time slot, we have greater odds of catching something and going from there. That sounds pretty fascinating stuff. It sounds like you're still in the early stages of still getting more data.
Oh yeah, we're in the very early stages. So yeah, we'll be doing a lot of work with this over the next. I mean, we're talking years. We're not talking weeks or months.
Right.
But the potential of it is just beyond fascinating. I mean, when we're hitting a 1 in 100,000 chance of coincidence multiple times, it's kind of Occam's razor that there's actually something going on. We just have to figure out what it is.
Mm-hmm. Now let me ask this: I don't know how your equipment runs, but you know how spirits can drain things. Is it a piece of equipment that can drain the equipment that you're using to do the experiments with? And if that happens, how do you combat that?
Yeah, it actually happens a lot. That's why our cartographer, Brandy, typically she'll log with a pen and paper. We had so many problems with computers failing and things like that. Mm-hmm. So far, what we do is generally the places that we've been investigating have had power, and so the cell phone that the RNG runs on is always plugged into power, because we have had some battery drain with it.
Right. I mean, it's just notorious with any kind of investigations, we all know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have you ever...
If I might, can I add something?
Yeah, please do.
I don't know exactly what your question was about the drainage of batteries, but the device that the RNG is run on at the moment is on a cell phone.
Okay.
So that device itself will not, be affected by any kind of battery drain. It's plugged in, so we will not lose the RNG during an investigation other than a power outage.
I will say this much. I was using my cell phone about 2 months ago in an investigation, just trying to film, the SRS and doing some things. And whatever was there, I watched it kill my phone from 60% to 0. Took me 3 hours to get it back up to 50%, and it did it again when I tried to do it again, and it fried my motherboard. It fried the motherboard in my cell phone. I took it to the guy to fix it, and he goes, "I've never seen that before. How'd you do that?" And I was like, "Well, you wouldn't believe me if I told you." Yes, I didn't even tell him.
Yeah, we've seen some crazy battery draining equipment, absolutely.
I can imagine.
Yeah, Dan was talking about Brandy using pen and paper to do a lot of the logging. And it's important to point out that one of the things that Dan has been kind of leading the way with in these kind of investigations is that all of that data that's logged, Dan insists on total transparency. So we have actual photographs of those paper and pen logs that she keeps, and our spreadsheets and all of our data. Everything is open to anybody else, any other investigators who are interested, who want to contact us and do the same kind of investigation on their own. We're hoping that this, it's a fairly simple procedure, really, and we're hoping that a lot of people pick up on it and start wanting to replicate it. And so, that when I heard Dan talking about the need for transparency, I was just like, kudos to him and to the Paranormal Research Institute, PRI, for insisting on this, because that's what, in academic circles, that's what peer review is all about. That is the scientific method. So we make all of this stuff open for anybody who wants to look at it.
Yeah, because if you could get a lot of different teams or factions all across the country using this stuff, that's a lot more data that you could use and a lot quicker to combine all this to get a lot more facts and results quicker to speed up the process.
Oh, absolutely.
To get to your goal to where you want to be, absolutely. And my other question was, have you ever tried this in some really, really hot spots like Waverly or Bobby Mackey's or, one of them kind of places that are kind of off the hook?
We haven't tried it in any of those yet. Unfortunately, one of the big problems that we have is, like most paranormal researchers, finances are always tough. And so we generally we have to go to Kansas City just to work with Mike, which is about a 7-hour drive for us. And then most of these locations want, generally several $100s a night for us to investigate. So it takes a while to build the funds up. We can dump $2,000 or $3,000 to go do a night of investigation. So
I got to tell you something. I went to Gettysburg last year, and it was off the hook. It was spirits everywhere. I would love to see you run some experiments